Tickets available at 2024MWC.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9. Up next, live headlines from NPR News and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the politics, policies, and permanent implications of mugshots. We explore the issue from all sides, talking to local media, criminal defense attorneys, and a local sheriff. Then, creating a creative space in downtown Jax. We talk to local placemakers about the value of pop-up entertainment events. And MOCA Jacksonville celebrates its centennial with an exhibition featuring more than 50 outsider and folk artists. Join the conversation. You can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email questions and comments to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance met supporters in a suburban Phoenix church yesterday. He told them Republicans need boots on the ground to win competitive races. NPR's Ben Giles has more.
While running for re-election 4 years ago, former President Donald Trump repeatedly attacked mail voting. But in states like Arizona, where that method of voting is increasingly popular, Republican allies of Trump have acknowledged the need for an effective ground game. Vance said that involves tracking which voters will receive a ballot by mail and knocking on their doors to ensure they return those ballots.
You take yourself, 9 of your friends and family, and make sure they get to the polls on or before Election Day.
Almost 90% of Arizona voters cast a ballot by mail in 2020. Ben Giles, NPR News, Mesa, Arizona.
President Biden travels to Wisconsin today to announce a $7.3 billion investment to help rural electric cooperatives move to green energy. NPR's Tamara Keith has more.
President Biden isn't running for re-election, so a big part of his legacy depends on how people judge what the administration is now branding as his Investing in America agenda. That includes a series of bills signed by Biden, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the American Rescue Plan. Tom Perez is a senior advisor to the president.
It's about results, and that's what this tour is about, showing results from our investments.
Wisconsin is also a key battleground in this year's presidential election, and polls indicate voters are still skeptical about the Biden-Harris economic agenda. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Georgia authorities say they will charge the 14-year-old suspect from yesterday's deadly school shooting as an adult. 4 people were killed. The suspect and his father had been questioned last year by law enforcement about a potential school shooting, but the FBI says there was no reason at the time to make an arrest. The Biden administration says its 3-phase plan to reach a ceasefire in Gaza is still the most viable method to stop the war and save lives, but talks are stalled. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says when Hamas took responsibility for killing more hostages recently, that altered the situation for negotiations.
What has changed in this week? What's changed is that they murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood. Now the world will seriously demand that Israel make concessions after this massacre? What message does this send to Hamas?
The Hamas attack on Israel killed about 1,200 people on October 7th. Since then, Israeli attacks in Gaza have killed nearly 41,000 Palestinians, many of them women and children. You're listening to NPR News.
At 4 minutes after 9, this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Florida's first automotive manufacturer breaks ground in a few weeks on Jacksonville's north side as German company Holon begins construction of a 491,000 square foot plant to build autonomous 15-seat electric people movers. The Jacksonville Transportation Authority's Ultimate Urban Circulator will be the first American customer to use them when the autonomous shuttle service begins next summer along Bay Street. Announced yesterday, JTA CEO Nat Ford says the new plant and JTA's use of the people mover is a plus for everyone.
They see it as a lighthouse project to getting into the United States. You manufacture the vehicles here in Northeast Florida. You have a signature world-recognized project with the U2C. You have the universities that are pumping out the students, the technology students they need. It was the right ecosystem. That's what was described to me by their CEO.
The $100 million plant on Zoo Parkway will create 150 initial jobs. The River Blossom Jamboree is coming this Saturday night to the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens. The live bluegrass garden concert runs from 5 to 7 in the museum's riverfront garden. The concert features performances by Jake Eddy and Band, Larry and Joe, and Low Ground. And you can get ticket information at cummermuseum.org. Rain today, thunderstorms very likely, temperatures near 84 degrees this afternoon, mid-70s overnight.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BritBox, working to help people discover British dramas and mysteries, including The Responder starring Martin Freeman, and entire series like Sherlock and Vera. Streaming at BritBox.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, do mugshots represent criminal accountability or just public humiliation? The answer may depend on your vantage point. Later, we preview a musical placemaking event on Bay Street and a new folk art exhibit at the city's Contemporary Art Museum. But first, who owns your mugshot? To talk about it, I'm joined by Putnam County Sheriff Homer Gator DeLoach. Welcome, Sheriff.
Good morning.
We're also here in studio, recently retired but legendary News4JAX assignment manager Frank Powers.
Good morning. This is my first time in years. I think my maiden voyage with you here, Ann.
It is. I'm
Thank
delighted to have you. Thanks for being here. We're also joined this morning by two local criminal defense attorneys, Regina Wright and Michael Rainka. Welcome both.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we also want to hear your calls and questions, thoughts about mugshots. You can join our conversation live on air by calling 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Sheriff DeLoach, I want to start with you because this issue is very much in the news recently in Putnam County and a matter for your constituents that you're dealing with. So for those who aren't familiar, what kind of issues have you been seeing in Putnam County with and how does that present a challenge to law enforcement?
You know, we do have a local mugshot page, and their primary mode of operation is to gather mugshots off of our public-facing page. I kind of have a unique perspective on mugshots because they are, in fact, public records. They're readily accessible on our websites, but what we see is that, first, I think we need to get back to the root of what social media was actually designed for. It's designed for entertainment purposes. It has morphed significantly over the last several years. But what we see now is mugshots that are posted primarily for public entertainment and or humiliation.
Mm-hmm. And these sites often look to the outside eye like they might be connected to law enforcement. Is that right?
So, and our page has actually been really good about not taking any copyrighted images or logos from the sheriff's office and posting them. I've seen in other counties where that isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah. And so does that pose a problem for law enforcement, the wider use of mugshots? Do you have any sense as to whether that is beneficial overall or harmful?
I think that's a little bit of a double-edged sword because what we see is Let's just take, for example, an individual who's arrested on a child support warrant, or their license gets suspended for non-payment of child support, and then they get arrested for driving on a suspended license, or they have a cash purge because they unfortunately got behind in their child support. I'm not certain that you'll ever convince me that's something that belongs on a mugshot page. When we contrast that with someone who is perhaps convicted of a child molestation or child pornography charge.
Hmm. And it's all equal on a page like that.
It is, because it's all public record. They pull it directly off of our website and then straight on to the social media it goes.
Regina White, I want to ask you, how does having a mugshot posted online impact a client of yours, particularly somebody that's either facing, ongoing case, or somebody that has already been through the process?
Well, recently I actually had a client who called me very concerned that his information, not necessarily his mugshot, but definitely his information was out there on the internet. And he was a businessman, so his concern was that people could Google him and they would see that he had been arrested for the charges that he'd been arrested for. So obviously it could have an impact beyond, some sort of social cost where people could see you and pick at you or whatever. But it could affect his reputation, his business, his ability to make a livelihood. So he was very concerned about that. So I think that obviously, as the sheriff said, it's public record. So it's out there. The question is, once it's out there, is there a way to pull it back? Because frankly, all you need is probable cause to arrest somebody, which is, the courts routinely say, is a very, very low standard. So you have that very low standard, which is enough to arrest someone. And if they're eventually exonerated, or the record is sealed, it's still out there. So there are costs beyond just mere embarrassment, especially when the person is exonerated. I think that's where the real problem comes into play.
And some people go through the process, and as you say, they're exonerated or found not guilty, but a lot of people are never charged in the first place.
Right, that's true.
And so those mugshots, just like all of them, are still out there.
Right.
Yeah. And Frank, I see you shaking your heads when you're talking about...
You said, will they ever go away? No, they don't.
Yeah.
We would get calls at Channel 4 from people who, I was arrested in 2021. Your story's still on the web. The charges were dropped, or they pleaded out, no contest. The case went into pretrial diversion. And then they said, can you take that off our website? We would. Then they would call back, now I need you to take it off Google. Well, we can't do that. So once they're out there, pretty much they're out there on the platforms that take content from media.
And so what was the station's policy in terms of granting a request to have somebody's mugshot removed?
We would check it out. We would go on. Here's the thing. It's not just mugshots that are out there. All the local clerk of court's websites where those charges are, they're all readily searchable by anybody. You don't need a password. You just put on your credentials there, which is basically just your website, and you can go on and find all this stuff. It's all there. But if someone would call and say, I'd like that removed, we would check out their claim of what happened with the case. If we found that the charges had been dropped or those other outcomes, we would take the information off our website.
So it was a conversation I know when I was at First Coast News we had sometimes when a case perhaps had been dropped or it had not been, carried through to a normal, process for one reason or another. But if it involved something like a child sex crime allegation, there was always the question as to, should that remain as an artifact in case there's future cases, other victims. Did you have those conversations?
Not that I can remember. People who get arrested in the stings that most all law enforcement agencies do, the evidence against them is pretty strong, and I don't recall a conversation with one of those individuals calling and say, hey, can you take this down?
Mm-hmm.
We did get calls from people saying, can you take this down? Because as the attorney said, it was bad PR online. But if the case is still going and you were arrested and we would check the arrest report, they just don't want it online. They weren't denying that they did what they were charged with, though.
Interesting. Michael Rainka, what do you hear from your clients when they are interested in having a mugshot removed?
Yeah, so I one of the most important things that people need to understand is there is a remedy that's available to them by, under the Florida statute. Florida statute 901.43 actually allows for the removal of arrest and booking photographs. An individual can't be charged to have this taken down by the entity or business that actually published the photograph.
Charged financially.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's no distinction in the statute between convicted or exonerated, acquitted. The statute is pretty clear and says that if a business publishes the photograph, you have the right to ask them to take it down. They have 10 days to take it down. If they don't take it down after that 10 days, then there are additional steps that you can take and potential financial consequences for that business. I think it's important to make the distinction, though. It doesn't apply to news organizations or the sheriff's office. It applies only to businesses where their primary business model is geared towards the publishing of those photographs.
If you're just talking about, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the use and abuse of mugshots. If you've ever clicked through a mugshot gallery or wondered how photos end up online, we want to hear from you. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I'd like to take a call now from Eric in Arlington. Good morning, Eric. Go ahead.
Hey, where in the sentencing guidelines does it say that when you get arrested, let alone convicted, that part of your sentence is going to be that you are going to be publicly shamed and humiliated? Even if you were wrongfully accused, even if you were mentally ill. I mean, I just can't, I don't know where people's heads are on this. This is just, and as far as the Channel 4 thing, are you guys the ones that have the wheel where you put people's pictures up there and you spin the wheel around like it's some kind of game? I mean, first of all, I don't know what's wrong with you to do something like this in the first place. I guess maybe it makes
those
you
are
money,
wanted individuals, sir.
Well, I mean, who do you think you are, though? I mean, do you think you're God or something? You could just play with people's lives like that? You're a member of the media. You're not God.
Arlington.
Never thought I was.
Eric, thanks for the
comments.
comments.
That was a partnership with JSO to get dangerous people off the street.
Right. That's not a mugshot issue as much as you're showing people who are wanted, have active warrants.
Yes.
And it's a partnership that you have with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. But I guess his point being, is it appropriate to be kind of putting people on Front Street? And you say very much.
These are the people we all want off the street.
Mm-hmm. We've got a call from Mark on the west side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I'm kind of going the other way. I think we should have more mug shots, especially, this has always been a bugaboo with me, that you will see a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old, before they're 18 or 21, is accused of some heinous crime, and, where lives are taken or they're in a horrible accident and they kill, numerous people. And then the local news media, and this is probably throughout the country as well, doesn't want to run their picture because somehow it'll, damage their psyche or something. I don't know. But if these people are doing dangerous adult crimes, I think we should see their picture. And again, at the very least, from a public safety standpoint, if not, it's part of the news. But that's my opinion.
Thanks, Mark. The question of what happens to these cases, the disposition matters, Sheriff. I think back to a case that I think was in Columbia County a few years ago where there were a couple of teen girls, 11 and 15, who were charged, arrested in the death of their brother, the murder of their brother initially. And the mugshots were put out there by law enforcement. They were put out by a lot of local media. And as the story evolved, it became clear that the girls had been victims of abuse by that brother for a number of years, physical and sexual abuse. And the narrative changed a little bit. They were not charged. It was, kind of became more of a self-defense case. But those mugshots are still up there of that 11-year-old and that 15-year-old. They're still out there on the internet.
Sure. So, there is a mechanism for having those taken down, just like Michael alluded to earlier. And if you actually listen, the fact of the matter is those may fall into the category of what some people would call youthful indiscretions. And I believe that people can change. There's a mechanism in place in the statutory framework in Florida that actually allows for those charges to be sealed and or expunged. and then a means for those mugshots to be taken down. The unfortunate reality is that once they're published on the web, they're in perpetuity.
I want to ask you about the practice of putting your website, having the mugshots available. Most agencies around here do have that. St. John's, Clay, Nassau, and your county. So if you go on to your inmate intake, the mugshots are available there. That's not the case with Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office does not readily make those available. You have to submit a public records request. Is that just a default setting for the website that you all use for your inmate research and intake records, or is there a choice that you make about putting those out there?
So I can't speak specifically for Jacksonville and what type of software suite that they're using, but that's actually a feature that is included as part of our records management system that we use at the sheriff's office, where it automatically publishes those mugshots to the web page, and that's frankly for the benefit of the public and for media outlets as well.
Mm-hmm. Regina Wright, what complaints do you hear from people? Do you have clients that are trying to get their records sealed or expunged, or looking at trying to have this information removed and having trouble doing so?
I've had clients ask me about getting it removed, but I've never had a client say, "Oh, I've actually tried," and they wouldn't do it. But frankly, if your mugshot is on the internet, you actually have you have to go to each and every source and say, "Can you remove this? Can you remove this?" and submit proof that it's either been sealed or somehow. I've not seen where they're like, "Oh, you were convicted, we're going to remove it." But if you can show them proof that your record has been sealed or you were somehow exonerated, then you have to go to each and every source where it is on the internet. And I guess depending on how popular your case was, that could be an onerous task. Obviously, could be hundreds of sites where this information is located.
And do people generally have like the tools, the resources to be able to accomplish something like that?
I would say most criminal defendants no. Obviously, don't have those kind of resources. Obviously, you have the white collar type cases where the individual probably does have the means to do that, but most individuals don't know how to do it and don't have the means to do it. So their information is probably going to remain on the internet in perpetuity.
Michael, when you are talking to your clients about these mugshots, obviously, if anybody's been tagged in an unflattering photo on Facebook, you have an inkling of what that's like. But if you're talking about somebody who's being photographed on the worst day of their life, in the worst moment, very often intoxicated or under the influence of some kind of drug, perhaps they've, been in a scuffle of some kind, and so they're looking rough. It's a little bit of a digital scarlet letter. And the reality of these mugshot galleries is they kind of feed on the worst of it, right? If the worse you look, the more popular your mugshot image will likely be.
Of course, and I think what Regina said and what you said is the mugshots are taken at the very beginning stages of an arrest. Like Regina said, it's a probable cause standard, which is a very low standard to arrest someone. And a lot of the times, what you see in these Facebook groups or the private websites is and also on the news is people are being essentially tried in the court of public opinion, and that's something that follows them around for the rest of their life, really more so than whatever happened with the criminal case, because you can see criminal cases that get dismissed for whatever reason. However, that, like you said, digital footprint is still there. And like you said, it's a photograph, it's a snapshot of a person at their worst time, their worst day in their life that lives on forever with very little context and very little information about that specific individual or how it may have transpired. Going back to something that Regina said, a lot of times, criminal defendants don't have the means to pursue these issues to try to have the photographs taken down. The statute specifically does have a provision that allows for attorney's fees, where I think going back a couple of years where there was a big push in tort reform to get rid of attorney's fees in many different cases and limit them. This particular statute does allow for attorney's fees. So if you do have to pursue legal action in court, those attorney's fees would be required to be paid by the other party as opposed to the individual seeking to have the photograph taken down. So the statute really is designed to help the individual. unfortunately, people just don't know about it. And going back to what Regina said, there's just so many different websites out there that you may be successful in getting one taken down, but there's just a line of 10, 15, 20 down the road that you still have to address individually.
Right. And even if you can recoup your legal fees, that's still something you have to, that's an outlay you're making at the front end. Even if you're able to recoup it later, you'd have to be able to finance a lot, the litigation.
Correct. You would. There's still fees as part of filing the civil lawsuit, as well as for an attorney to keep track of their time and to really see how much is going into a case, in the hopes that who's ever behind this website would actually pay it at the end of the day.
Frank, you alluded to sex sting operations, of which we're all familiar. In recent years, those have tended to focus on men primarily who've been arrested in kind of a sexual predation way, not necessarily men who have been participating with sex workers, but more people who are trying to meet children online or something like that. But there was a time when anytime somebody was arrested, including, people who are trafficked or sex workers, those mugshots would be out there as well. Has that conversation changed? I mean,
it changed dramatically. Stings by police using an undercover officer as a decoy. There would be multiple arrests, or the officers would pose as Johns, and then there would be 12 or so women arrested, in the usual hot spots like down Phillips Highway by Emerson. After one of those stings, in which a number of women were arrested, Rethreaded asked for a meeting with the managers at Channel 4, and they presented a very compassionate case for these women are victims too. You need to stop showing them. And the other thing is those are misdemeanor charges. So we had a long conversation on that, and that basically ended. I think they went to the other stations too. And so you don't see, at least in Jacksonville, or in years, when women have been arrested for prostitution, you don't see their mugshots. In fact, the arrests are rarely reported, maybe just as, JSO arrested half a dozen, because they are responding to complaints from businesses up and down those areas saying, hey, look, we can't be operating with women out in front of my business asking people for sex. But that did change, and media attitudes toward mugshots are changing all over the country. I have friends who have gone on to other markets. They say they never give us mugshots.
The Rethreaded, we should say, is an advocacy group for people who've been trafficked sexually.
Yes, and have gotten out of it and are now building new productive lives.
How has the conversation changed around race? I know that, especially in recent years, media has had a bit of a racial reckoning about how it covers crimes, how it uses mugshots. Very often they have skewed towards featuring people who are not white, in these mugshots. And there's been studies and comparisons about what kind of shots are used when someone's arrested. There was a very prominent case where there was, several white college students who were arrested for something, and they're featured in their suits or, they're kind of in their yearbook photo as opposed to the mugshot. How have conversations about race changed, internally at a station like yours?
The attitudes have changed, but when a mugshot is out there, most of the conversations are about is how old is the suspect? Is it a misdemeanor? Is it a sex charge? Along prostitution? Is there going to be damage beyond the one-time reporting of an arrest? Is this a case where, no matter what the race of the suspect is this something that's going to be followed up on as the case goes through the courts? And that's something that consultants say, don't just do what's called a one-off, report the arrest and then never report it again. People are interested in this case, and we can tell which are drawing the interest of viewers by the comments and how many hits are made on the website. If this is a case that's interesting now and is producing viewer interest, then follow it up.
Regina Wright, I want to ask you about that. And I know you and Michael have to step out in a minute or two because you actually have to be in court, do your jobs. But how do you see that conversation? Do you see any change in terms of the use of mugshots, particularly when we're talking about, skewing one way or another in the prevalence of people of color and their mugshots being put in the media?
I mean, I really don't know the answer to that, mainly because the cases I normally handle are fairly serious. And so to some extent, I would expect my clients to make the news in some respects. I mean, I know there was a bunch of conversation about, like you say, how they, how they portray black people in the media, and I've noticed just that a lot of times when they mention assailants now, they don't even mention the race. I've seen that kind of change, honestly. Maybe, and I'm not sure, maybe in the past few years, but I mean, I deal with fairly serious cases generally, so I don't really look at it like, oh, they're putting my client on there if my client happens to be black or white. I just would expect to see their pictures, their mugshots, just because of the nature of the offenses that I'm dealing with.
Yeah. Michael, any final thoughts on the mugshots before you have to pop out of here?
Like I said before, I think it's just important for people to realize that there is a remedy available to them, that they can have the photographs taken down. There is no charge; they can't be charged by the entity or the business that publishes it, and there is a way, for them to have this addressed, regardless of what happened with the case, whether or not they were convicted. It really makes no difference. If the photograph is out there and they make the proper request, it has to be taken down.
Well, Michael, Rainka, Regina Wright, thanks for being here today. We know you've got to step out. Our conversation continues, though. We're talking about the use and sometimes abuse of mugshots. You can call us and comment. You can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can reach out on social media as well. Frank, I know that in 2021, the Associated Press said it was no longer going to publish the names of suspects in minor crimes, and also using their mugshots. They said that the exceptions there were going to be active fugitives, which we discussed a little bit earlier, sex offenders, public officials, and suspected serial killers.
And none of those are misdemeanors. Those are all felony crimes.
Yeah, and that sort of aligns with the policies at your former station.
Right, and others. If it's a misdemeanor, usually the case is going to be adjudicated or eventually dropped. If felonies, though, in the case of, I know that one viewer or listener was not happy with the Wheel of Justice, but most of those cases, you see those people. And remember, what is the Wheel of Justice about? If you see this guy, call us. So, yes, you have to have a face associated with the felon who's wanted by police.
Yeah, and that is sort of like the model of a most wanted,
Yes.
type.
There are other entities that it's the same idea. Felon of the Week, I think your counterpart in Flagler County, Gator, has his own show that he puts on there. Rick Staley?
Yes, that's correct. Sheriff Staley in Flagler.
Right.
Actually, so Sheriff Staley in Flagler County, he's also been experiencing what he has labeled a scam that's happening with the use of mugshots on a private Facebook page or an individual Facebook page, not the official Facebook page. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say about that issue.
Sure.
A Facebook page known as Flagler County Mugshots uses images of this agency, its physical address, and myself in an attempt to trick you into believing they are part of the sheriff's office. Don't be fooled. They are not. It is a poor attempt to make money off the mistakes of others.
So you said your site in Putnam has not been doing that same sort of impersonation, but obviously this is happening. What is an agency allowed to do? What options do you have in that kind of circumstance?
I think this all boils down to a little bit of common sense, which unfortunately is lacking sometimes. Like Frank alluded to earlier, most mainstream media outlets will not publish photographs of juvenile offenders or someone who's been arrested for a relatively minor crime. Primarily what you're seeing those in is cases of significant public interest. And I think if these mugshot groups that are on social media would adhere more to those types of policies that focus on crimes of significant public interest, I don't think there would be such an outrage.
Frank, what about juveniles? That is a difficult discussion, especially when they're arrested and charged with really serious crimes. Did does the media make any distinction typically between an arrest and a charge when it comes to showing a juvenile photo?
Yes, depending on what the crime is, if the suspect is going to be charged as an adult. If it's a murder case, well, yes. I mean, we had, unfortunately, a 17-year-old who executed 3 people in a drug deal years ago, and there was some discussion in the newsroom about not showing him, but, I mean, once the reports came out and what he did, the discussion went away. He cold-bloodedly killed 3 people in a drug-related robbery in which he didn't get any money. Social media is the cat's out of the bag. It's never going back in. But I can remember before social media, when I was living in my old neighborhood in Mandarin, an individual had just gotten out of prison after a 20-year sentence for child molestation. He was on the FDLE website as a registered sex offender, and somebody made it their business to go around the neighborhood, I mean, like every intersection, and post the picture on either a telephone pole or a street sign, because when he was released into the custody of his parents, who lived like 8 doors down. Nobody wanted him there. He had served his sentence, and he had the right to go on with his life. But that's what's going on in some of these websites. There were websites, I think most of them have gone away now, that we called blackmail sites. They would get the mugshot, and then they would contact, you want this down? Here's what it's going to cost. Those have pretty much gone away.
Yeah, and that is what the Flagler County Sheriff was talking about. Almost an extortion scheme is what he called it. And that's not legal.
No, not at all. And I think it's worth having the conversation about, too. There are some real tangible benefits that we see from these sites as well, because they have a huge following. Let's take, for example, the case of a missing child. Whenever we push that information out onto our social media sites, share it with local media outlets, and then obviously the very next thing that happens within just a matter of a few seconds, these moderators on these mugshot pages are actually taking and pushing that information out to the public for an even broader reach. So that helps us spread the word about this missing child or person of interest that we're looking for in a particular crime, and can certainly be of a benefit to us and the general public.
Are you able to engage with sites like that at all? Do they listen to you if you ask them to do something one way or another?
We're fortunate, unlike Sheriff Staley, that we do have a pretty good relationship with that particular group that we have in Putnam County, and we found them, for the most part, to be very reasonable and amenable to a request if we have one, for the most part.
Is the answer maybe, and this would have to be addressed by the Florida legislature, change the law to prevent a release of misdemeanor mugshots?
So, that brings an interesting point. That's, as you said, something that would have to be contemplated by the legislature. We already don't release mugshots in juvenile cases if they're misdemeanors. Now, if they're felony cases, as Frank spoke about earlier, or cases of significant public interest that are felonies, then yes, we have the ability to release those juvenile mugshots.
And law enforcement mugshots are also exempt, not released.
There's an exemption, but again, if it's a case of significant public interest, we do have the option of releasing those law enforcement officers' mugshots as well, and have in the past.
All right, we've got a call from Don in North Jacksonville. Good morning, Don. Go ahead. Are you there, Don? Good morning. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, can I ask a question now?
Sure.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm calling because I was wondering, what are their thoughts about passing legislation to ban such behavior of using mugshots and make it illegal? I know it seems to border in the free speech topic, but it seems to be something that other countries do, like in England or in Brazil, where they ban certain expression or abuse of expression online, and there is a punishment or a label that's a crime that people can be prosecuted for. How about doing that in the U.S.?
Thanks, Don. I mean, certainly.
Boy, that's something that Congress will be wrestling with for years.
Yeah, you're talking about
regulate the internet,
the very bedrock of the foundation on which our country was built around the First Amendment.
Yeah. And certainly there are more restrictive laws in other countries and in Europe. I mean, most of that information that we routinely see and that you say, Frank, is something anyone can search up on a court website is private, is never released.
And in some cases, you go on to, for example, I'll tell you the Clay County Sheriff's Office or Clerk of Court's website. It's grainy and it's black and white, but the mugshot is there as attached to the police report. So the things that these groups are using, sometimes for not altruistic purposes, they can be found elsewhere. You have to look for it. You have to know where to look for it. And these groups are making it easier for the shamers. I'm sure the comments on some of these websites are not very complimentary. It is an abuse to some extent. How do you regulate it? I don't know.
Yeah. We've got a final call here from Marianne in Arlington. Good morning, Marianne. Go ahead. Go ahead, Marianne.
Hi. No, I was going to mention that there is a way for these mugshot websites owned by the counties to lock the mugshots and not allow them to be listed. These people who do the mugshot pages, they right-click save to keep the photo. And there's a way that you can change the code on your website to prevent that.
So we were talking about that a little bit, Sheriff. Is that an option you would ever consider, limiting what kind of mugshots you routinely post, or trying to interfere with the software, to block it, as she noted?
Again, and I understand her concern, but I think we go back to that First Amendment argument. And the fact of the matter is, it's not protected by law, and we have an obligation to release that information. I can tell you that if I just unilaterally chose to block mugshot websites or mugshots from our website, there would be a public outcry, not only from the media, but from the public who routinely go and check that website. We would be inundated with public records requests for websites, or from websites, from media outlets, and from individuals requesting mugshot photos, to which by law they're entitled.
Yeah, I guess that's the flip side. If you don't make them available, you're going to be dealing with all of these requests, like from Frank.
Just take a picture off the screen with your cell phone.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, it's a really interesting discussion. I appreciate you coming up, Sheriff Gator DeLoach from Putnam County. Appreciate you being here today to talk about it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Frank Powers, so nice to see you. Thanks for all of your contributions. Back. Transforming underused spaces into celebrated community places is the mission of PlacemakingJax. The group is celebrating its 2-year anniversary, and joining me to discuss it is Eric Biggins, team leader at PlacemakingJax. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. We're also joined this morning by Bryant Patterson and Tim Hightower, both members of A Few Fellas Brass Band.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. So, Eric, we've been hearing a lot lately more about the concept of placemaking, but for people who aren't familiar, what is placemaking?
Okay, placemaking is simply it's a term called tactical urbanism, which is a series of pop-up shops, pop-up events that give the block ownership, make people feel included in the things that's going on. And I would say PlacemakingJax has been fueling the thriving culture down on Bay Street since the pandemic.
Tell me again that term that you used.
Tactical urbanism.
Tactical urbanism. I've not heard that before. And so that's kind of occupying a space that is maybe underused or not used at all.
Exactly.
And trying to activate it.
It's activate the space, giving the residents and the people that use that space latitude to give input.
And there's a little bit of a history to that when you think about things like raves, for instance, using an empty warehouse, creating a space that becomes a community space simply, by being occupied.
Correct. I will say Ian Rainey, the barkeep and owner at a Justice Pub, he's been around, and he's been using the beautification of the block as the catalyst for that. And I'll say once we started doing little small initiatives to do things like put up lights and get the receptacles working on the block, then we were able to actually do things out there. People started seeing a change. They felt more comfortable, and the crowd started coming, and different events started to pop up.
So Ian Rainey is a well-known business owner, entrepreneur. He's from Shantytown, Rain Dogs, Borough Bar, currently a Justice Pub, and that's in the district that's known as the Elbow, which is kind of anchored on Bay Street, but is one of these spaces that is benefiting from this active outside space as well as indoor spaces. And so you work with Ian, you are working with First Fridays to kind of build this environment. So how does music interplay with it?
Okay, with the music, we have the few fellas, and the few fellas uh, will set up outside, and we will put on like a festival type second line feel with the Jacksonville flavor, and as people traverse up and down the block, they engage with the band, with the dancing, and with the tunes that they recognize.
So Brian, tell us about A Few Fellas. This is at least 8 member. It's a big brass band.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so how do you work on a space like this? How do you occupy it? What does the music bring? And how are you interacting with people who are out and about?
Well, we just we like to get together and play, and we know that music will make people a little bit more engaged, and would like to peruse the venue. Yes, we got the Few Fellas band together, just to I guess maybe fulfill some of our needs to push music out, and we also know that will bring people in. We try to have a good time, and we know that it's going to be infectious to the people that are walking by.
And this is a little bit New Orleans infused, but also has got just a funky kind of soul vibe.
That's correct. A lot of us are transplants from other parts of the country. I'm not originally from Florida. I'm from Virginia. And so at least what I bring to it, I used to be in the military band in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And other people come from different parts of the country. We all bring that together, and we have our own brand of music.
So, Tim, tell me a little bit about how you came to this project, and also what is the special appeal of like a brass band?
I came on because I love playing. I play the tuba.
Oh.
I love playing with these fellas. And for the most part, a lot of us know each other from elementary, high school, and it's just fun to play with each other. That's our stress reliever. That's our thing. We can't wait to do it at the end of the week, or we just love doing it. We love playing with each other and having fun.
And there's really just a special energy though to a brass band. Am I right? I mean,
Yes,
they're just
ma'am.
really kind of elevating.
It's we put a Louisiana type Jacksonville feel to it. A lot of stuff is up tempo. Then we could also at the same time we could also slow it down a little bit. So it's we're gonna tend to everybody's needs.
So, Eric, this is the second year of this effort. How can people participate? Like, what's upcoming that they can be a part of?
Okay, on Friday, this will be our Labor Fest game night edition of First Friday. So every month we try to incorporate a different theme. Last month being the Jacksonville Caribbean Carnival's theme. Like I said, this month we're celebrating labor. Being that Labor Day was on Monday, we're going to have a Labor Fest game night where all of the labor unions and the working families just can come out,
And this is giant Jenga and
Yes, we'll have giant Jenga, oversized Uno, the giant chess checkers. We actually will have also the billiards tournament inside the live bar.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on today. Eric Biggins, Tim Hightower, and Bryant Patterson. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Up next, MOCA Jacksonville celebrates its centennial with an exhibit showcasing outsider art.
Congaree and Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com. The Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp AAA Baseball bring great family fun to the ballpark for their last homestand, September 17th through September 22nd versus the Gwinnett Stripers. More info at jacksonvillejumboshrimp.com.
The threatened northern spotted owl, another species the barred owl is pushing into their habitat. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife has decided to cull almost 500,000 barred owls.
We're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to have an enormous body count of barred owls, and we're not going to do the spotted owls anything to improve their circumstance because they're still going to face the same habitat problems that put them in this situation in the first place.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. Next time on The Middle, Generation Z makes up about a quarter of the U.S. population. They could be a big voting bloc. So what are young voters most concerned about? That's our question, and we want to hear from you, especially if you're under, let's say, 40. Call 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, and join us next time on The Middle.
Tonight at 9 here on WJCT News 89.9.
There's an ongoing war in Sudan that's received little global attention or intervention. Outside powers are fueling a conflict that's killed thousands. Charities now fear more than 2 million could starve to death by the end of the year. Next time on 1A, what happens if we continue to ignore the world's forgotten war in Sudan?
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Back. It's part of their ongoing centennial celebration. And joining me with details on their fall exhibition opening is the museum's director, Caitlin Doherty. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so nice to see you again.
Great to see you.
So the opening celebration includes 3 very distinct exhibitions.
Right.
And I want to start with one just because it's close to my heart. It's called Fill My Heart with Hope, actually. It's a collection of largely folk artists, outsider artists, some really well-known names in that community.
Right. So it's, as you said, Fill My Heart with Hope, works from the Gordon W. Bailey collection. It's an exhibition which is an inclusive exhibition. It brings together a diverse selection of artists from Mr. Bailey's collection. He's one of the foremost collectors of this type of art in the United States. And it's an exhibition many of whom the artists represented are self-taught, and we like to use that phrase often when referring to those artists. But others who do have formal training, but all of them are driven with a certain, for others, other reasons, and bringing those works together across 2 floors of our exhibition. Looking at seminal artists, as you said, Sam Doyle, Purvis Young,
Most
Proctor,
Oliver.
so many really fine examples, alongside more contemporary examples on the other floor, and also a focus on Florida artists. You have this heartbeat, which is undeniable when you walk through the exhibition, and I think really will affect the viewer as they do.
There's something relatable in the artwork in ways too, because very often they're using found objects or things that you find in the natural world and kind of incorporating things, whether it's dirt and grass or broken pottery.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think, as you said, that's relatable. It's lived experiences, the things that surround us, and that challenges us to think beyond the gilt frame that a museum often presents, and to think about the art that surrounds us, that we create, that we might want to create, this art of necessity.
So there's another element to this 3-tiered exhibition, and it's sculptor Emil Alzamora. Yeah. So his work is really extraordinary, very evocative, physical depictions. A lot of times these bodies that look like they've been torn apart or kind of pieced back together. So tell us about him and why he's part of this celebration.
So very much focused on the human form, right? Relatable. It's the first thing probably most of us draw as children. And so this artist really approaches with different use of material, different depictions, sculptural works, again, challenging the viewer to think about something that we all know ourselves, but also that we've all approached in terms of artwork. So using these multi-filters to think differently about the most relatable form of all. And this is an exhibition that's in our UNF gallery. It's curated by 2 UNF sculpture professors, and it's part of the Devereaux Visiting Artist Award. And that exhibition will be opening also this evening alongside our film My Heart with Hope, works from the Gordon W. Bailey collection. And the artist will be present with us and in conversation. So at the opening tonight, people could come. These are individual pieces which need to be understood as such, and yet collectively come together to form the body of work.
So there is one other element to this that I just briefly want to touch on, but this is kind of looking more at the history of MOCA Jax.
That's right. And it's our 100-year anniversary, as you said. This is a small exhibition that we have in our foyer, which has come about due to incredible research for the past over a year by scholars, by interns, by students from the University of North Florida, by our curatorial department. And we've really hunted through the archives, through the drawers, through people's memories to tell the story of MOCA over the last 100 years and to pull that out into key milestones, because we're remembering our past to celebrate this moment and to dream about where we go from here.
Well, the party's tonight. I think it starts at 7. It's free.
That's right. It's open to the public. Please come along. It's going to be a great party, and it will kick off the second half of our 100-year anniversary.
Well, happy celebrating. Caitlin Doherty, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so very much.
And that's our program. We encourage your feedback and suggestions. You can send either to First.
Provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
AARP Florida believes that voters 50 and older often have the power to decide elections. That's why AARP has collected up-to-date information about when, where, and how to vote. More information is at aarp.org/vote.